Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another Nacho Tuesday. And today I have Liz, how do you say it? Is it Wilke?
Wilke, yeah.
Yes, perfect. I'm getting good at this stuff. But
Excellent.
we have Liz Wilke from Gusto, and she's their head of economics. The principal economics actually can you explain it? Sorry.
Sure. I can tell you I'm the principal economist at Gusto. Gusto has a data and economics research team that they started about 3 years ago. I've been there about 2 years. And my job is basically to take all of the data that's on the platform about Gusto's small business customers up to hundreds of employees, and then sort of put that data out and do original research about small businesses to help people understand what's going on with this really important segment of the economy, and also to help small businesses sort of understand the world they're operating in, help founders understand, how the world is changing and what they can do about it, to sort of be more successful and to meet sort of, honestly, these kinds of topsy-turvy times that we find ourselves in.
Yep, I read all about it every day. So what got you into down this path, I guess, what got you into this kind of a role?
So honestly, I was at LinkedIn before I came to Gusto, and I was on their economic graph team, which is a similar sort of group. And I just love the idea of taking all of this data that companies have and turning it into really useful insight, right? So researchers and academics do really important and valuable work, but we can get data from companies sort of at granular levels and in real time that sort of nobody else can have. And there's just something so cool about that. So when I got the call from Gusto saying, hey, we need somebody who can help us talk about, the small business economy and hiring and what's going on with them and, remote work and the pandemic related stuff, I said, sign me up. It sounds amazing. I think I have one of the coolest jobs ever. And I just love really helping people to understand what's going on, like businesses and founders, this segment of the economy that drives so much activity, but we really don't know that much about. And businesses themselves, if you've got a 50-person company, you're not spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on like a big consultant to help you think about like your workforce strategy or whatever, right? And I was like, but we can do that, right, with the data that we have on the platform. So I honestly, the opportunity was so good and the work's so interesting.
Yeah, so you recently published some economic research, and you called it "The Economy Explained," taking such a complex concept and distilling it down for the average business owner. What were some of the key insights and findings that you found from this research?
Yeah, we've been doing The Economy Explained for almost a year now. We started late last year, at the height of 8% inflation and 2 jobs for every unemployed person. And what we found from small businesses and the people that serve them, like accountants, HR professionals, they said, look, my CEOs are coming to me and they want to know what's going on in the economy and what they should do about it. And they said, but I'm not an economist. I'm an accountant or I'm an HR professional. I just don't know. So we sort of realized there was this gap in the market, which is that the economy really in very real ways, right, affects these businesses. But a lot of economic commentary is one for other economists, right? Or, for investors on Wall Street. And so we made The Economy Explained to say, hey, here are the numbers, but here's what it really means for you. And we do that every quarter. We do it for accountants and we also do it for small businesses. It's public. You can Google it and go to our website and find this quarter's release. And so anyway, this quarter, what we sort of found is that the talent market by and large is still quite tight, but it's coming down. I think we can talk a little bit about how that is different for tech entrepreneurs in this space, and we can delve into that a little bit. But also that interest rates are really, really cranking up, and that's creating a lot of credit crunch, right, for businesses that would go to credit markets. And so we're advising them to sort of really think about their capital spend, try and shore up their cash flow, sort of really preserve, right, the runway and the extra cash that they have on hand so they don't catch themselves sort of flat-footed without, right, the cash flow to pay their bills and then have to go to credit market to get it. And then we're also, I think, just really helping people to think about, pricing strategy and value, especially for direct to consumer businesses, where consumers, I think, are really towards the end of the year going to start thinking about, what spend is really necessary, especially as like student loans start to come due and credit card debt is building up, et cetera. So those are sort of the big takeaways for us this quarter from The Economy Explained. And then I'd also like to sort of put a plug. We sort of expanded that idea, and I'm now hosting a 10-minute podcast every week called the Gustonomics Podcast, which is really about explaining, parts of the economy that are going on sort of really intangible, like approachable ways.
Yeah, I like that because a lot of people just kind of understand the economy from like a macro level. They read like a headline, but they don't really know what's going on behind the scenes.
Mhm.
They just know good or bad, and they kind of reflect their business strategy accordingly. But I like how you're kind of breaking it down and giving people specific insights into to specific actions they can take. You brought up a great point around raising money right now. So with the interest rates so high, there's a lot of channels that you normally used to be able to go raise money from, but it's really expensive to get that money now. So you could look at maybe alternative means for raising money, which, I'd like to plug one of our partners, Lighter Capital. They help fund businesses as well with low interest loans based on your actual revenue. So there is other options out there, but these types of macroeconomic conditions are really affecting small businesses, as you mentioned. What other steps can small business owners take to ensure that they're hiring the right talent right now, given these tech trends, that they're raising money when they need to, or should they possibly even wait a couple months to raise money?
Yeah. I mean, so let's start with the talent aspect first. I mean, so one, anybody who was in business last year is probably still sort of trying to catch up and figure out what happened. I think tech in particular can sort of breathe a little bit more easily now because tech companies in our data have really slowed down their hiring. They're not actually letting go of people at much higher levels than any other company, but they've really slowed down their hiring, right? The sort of whole sector, I think, was a little shook up by the big layoffs that happened earlier this year. And I think lots of tech entrepreneurs are sort of saying, hey, let's take a beat. If somebody leaves, let's not fill that role just yet, right? Let's wait and see what happens. And I think it was sort of that showing up in our data that they're really just sort of being a little bit more cautious. The good news on that side is that, there are they have a higher probability of getting somebody into that new seat, right? And really making a good match, right? They can take their time. They can be very intentional, right? Especially when you're a young sort of startup community,
Yeah.
it really matters who you have on your team and who you can depend on. So the flip side of that is that tech entrepreneurs can really take their time and find the right people and the right fit in this sort of talent market where they're just slowing hiring. There are a few more people around, and they can really be intentional about who they want to bring on. In terms of, and that has like cost implications too, right? So
Yeah.
in terms of thinking about capital and runway, I really just say preserve your capital, right? Don't hire somebody unless you're really sure that they're right and they can drive the business and help you meet that revenue.
Mhm.
And I think, really, even if you're going for sort of VC or other funds, right? To your point, even businesses that are doing alternative services are thinking like, where's the revenue, right? So I think gone for a while are the days where like you can
Yeah.
achieve like big funding levels on an idea, right? You
Yeah.
really need to focus on like proving out that concept and getting to some solid revenue
Yeah.
numbers, even if you want to do some sort of alternative financials things. And going to a traditional bank, right, is sort of getting harder because
Yeah.
bank officers are tightening their standards for loans and they're limiting the amount of credit that you can actually get. So, I mean, sort of any way you slice it, it's going to be harder to get financing. So, entrepreneurs who can really sort of focus on what are the revenue outcomes that I can achieve and how do I maximize those in the short term is going to prevent you from having to get as much credit. It's going to make it a lot easier to get more financing, right, when you ultimately need it.
Yep. Yeah, and it's a good wake up call for a lot of businesses too, right? So you should always be thinking this way frugally. Sometimes, unfortunately, macro conditions kind of force you to, but it's just a good business lesson of life to kind of carry forward from there. But on the flip side, like you mentioned, there is a lot of great talent out in the field right now that's available for a lot of startups and small businesses to pick up. So there's a lot of people that are really experienced and for no fault their own got let go from a company, but
Mhm.
now's a great opportunity to actually bring some of this talent into your company to help grow your business. So on the flip side, be on the lookout
Yeah,
for great people
definitely.
to build your team around.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Great. And so, do you see any differences on the local regional level, like between hot tech markets like San Francisco, New York, Seattle, maybe some up and coming areas like Austin?
Yeah, so I looked into this. I mean, so it's actually a lot more regional than it is industrial,
Yeah.
right? So, and I mean, I think that's you know not unexpected, right? Given that regional economies are sort of all tied together. The Southeast is doing quite well in terms of hiring and economic resilience. Now, there aren't as many, strictly tech companies in the Southeast, although Andy, I think it's probably not a surprise to you or any of your listeners that the line between what is strictly a tech company and what is strictly just a modern company that uses a lot of tech tools, right?
We
And
work.
has like, yeah, exactly, right? What's a tech company and what's a real estate business or a realtor or, a retailer? And I think, that line is getting increasingly blurry. So you don't think about the Southeast as being like a big tech hub, but the economy has been really, really resilient and sort of outpacing concerns of this sort of downturn or soft landing. What we're seeing, I mean, honestly, San Francisco's definitely a little bit depressed. The hiring in the sort of really big tech hubs like San Francisco, Seattle to a lesser extent, right? New York is honestly doing just fine. It's sort of humming along, all things considered. We are seeing sort of a sustained like depression in hiring there, but that's to say that, I mean, that's not the whole tech landscape sort of blew up from COVID, right? The tech companies sort of started to get up everywhere and anywhere, right, that founders wanted to be. And since the expansion of remote and hybrid work, we've really seen, so many new companies are either fully remote from the start or they're hybrid, right? And they're willing to hire from anywhere in the region or anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world. And I think that's really sort of made this distinction between what's a tech hub and where can tech employment happen like really fuzzy.
Yeah, that's a great point. We're finding a lot of great talent, at NachoNacho in the Midwest, among other places too. A lot of people realize they don't have to be, in New York City, which I'm at right now, paying New York City prices. And they could be somewhere nice where, they could work from home and do all that. What are your thoughts, I guess, kind of a side question, but on the whole commercial real estate space, and how does the effect of hybrid or remote work affect commercial real estate?
Thank you for such a lovely question. It was a big question,
Yeah.
but first, I want to say I think New York and sort of high rent places take a lot of guff for being so high rent, and it is true that there's a ton of great talent to be had out there. I personally like New York. I think it's really a matter of choice and lifestyle, right? I think if you love New York, you can now sort of stay and live there, and if you don't love New York, you now don't have to live there, right? In order to connect your job to the place that you are, and I think that's the real promise with remote and hybrid work. So I just want to say I think New York is a lovely place, and I really enjoy it. So I feel like
I moved here.
yeah. But in terms of commercial real estate, like there are real impacts, right? And I think the real impact for entrepreneurs and small business startups is what's going to happen to community and regional banks as commercial real estate sort of churns through. So what happens for those of your listeners that don't know, you don't sort of do a mortgage on a commercial real estate property for 30 years like you would on a house. You actually do it for 7 years, right? And then there's a big balloon payment at the end of 5 or 7 or 10 years, whatever the length of your mortgage is. And so all of the mortgages for commercial real estate that were financed back in 2015, 2016, 2017, when occupancy rates were way, way up and interest rates were way, way down, are now coming due, right? There are these big balloon payments that usually you just refinance them, right? But now if you're trying to refinance at 8% when your occupancy rates are down 20 or 30%, right? Like that's going to be a really big problem for lots of commercial real estate mortgagees. And so there's this concern that they'll send back, right, some of the keys, right? Sort of like the 2008 jingle mail where people were just sending back the keys to their homes, and that a lot of some community and regional banks will have a hard time sort of addressing this because on their balance sheet, they tend to hold a lot of commercial real estate relative to like big banks, for instance. And so there's this sort of big question about how are they going to meet that challenge and what does that mean for small and regional banking that a lot of small businesses, especially outside of major tech hubs, sort of depend on for financing.
Definitely. And you mentioned something about consumer spending as well too, and credit card debts. Should small businesses be worried at all about consumer spending slowing down, maybe going into the end of the year? Or
I think consumer spending will slow down. I don't think that there's strong signal right now that we're going to see some big drop off in consumer spending. I think that we're going to see a sort of a like long tail landing, right? So consumers have really been defying expectations for the last 18 months. Every
Yep.
economist has been saying, yes, but next month they'll definitely stop spending all that money. And consumers are definitely not listening to all the economists who are telling them what they should be doing out in the world. And they're just, they're still seeming really confident. And there's still a lot of savings built up from the pandemic. And credit card debt is going up, but credit card delinquencies really are not, we're not seeing big spikes in delinquencies there. And so I think what consumers are really telling us is like, yes, we're putting a lot on the credit card, but we're not having any problem paying this off. And I don't think that we're looking at any signs that are telling us that there's going to be some big drop off in consumer spending. But I do think that we're going to see consumers get a little more cautious, right, about how they spend their money, which is why we're encouraging the direct to consumer businesses to really think about value pricing, right? Sort of mid-level, but how can you help consumers really feel like they're getting a lot of the bang for their buck?
Yep, definitely. And they also have to consider price changes as well, too, right? So once you increase prices, it's kind of harder to go back from that, right? So, can you weather the storm as a business, or is it time to raise prices? And then, are you willing to stick to those prices? Of course, you could always do discounts, but, it kind of burns your reputation a little bit if you're bouncing back between pricing quite a bit.
Yeah. And if you do that too much, then you're telling your customers that if they just wait, right, they can expect some discount down the road, right? And then you can sort of lose your regular pricing strategy.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we mentioned earlier that building a team makes or breaks a company. So, what are some of the areas that people could look for talent right now? You mentioned just globally is kind of a good space to look. So it's not just going to San Francisco or New York and finding people there. But what are some other areas that might be bubbling up to find talent?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I really think that remote work has, again, like blown open the field on where talent can be found. So most startups that have formed since the pandemic, many more of them are fully remote or fully hybrid from the start. In fact, fewer than half of the companies in our data set that were fully in person before the pandemic are fully in person still. The vast majority have gone to remote and hybrid work among them. And so I think that has really changed. So most businesses that are remote, they don't feel constrained to their local community, right? They can hire from anywhere. And in fact, the ones that were born remote, they don't have all the baggage, right? Or the processes of doing in-person work. They can sort of start from scratch doing remote work. International work is honestly a natural extension of that. And we've seen a lot of businesses that are fully remote. They'll hire from anywhere, and they're much more likely to have international contractors or international employees. And that they've told us, I needed skills, I needed to hire somebody, I needed somebody who had, the mix of experience that I needed. And they've sort of by and large been quite happy with their expansion to international workers too. Tech companies are sort of disproportionately represented in the set of companies that have international workers, either contractors or international employees. And they're telling us we need the skills they have, and they're very cost effective, and they really work hard. And we have been sort of asking them what are the sorts of like practices that they are doing in order to get these people on board and to keep them really engaged.
That's a great point. So since everybody's moving towards more remote work, and you might be hiring international even these days a lot more than you would 10 years ago, what kind of perks and benefits can you provide, to these employees? Say, if they can't all just go down to the Google office and have like their sleeping pods and all those classic perks sometimes you get, like what other benefits are really trending now according to the data?
Yeah, I mean, I think the days of sort of selling people on the ping pong pod are probably sort of behind us. I just don't think it's as valuable a perk as it used to be because we just don't work in the same ways, right? But what I do think is honestly remote and high levels of flexibility, not just about your location or whether or not you come into an office, but the hours, right? And the days specifically that you work. These are really, really valuable benefits. We did an analysis last year of remote versus non-remote workers, and the attrition retention benefit of remote work is equivalent on average. There's lots of variability on that, but on average to $11,000 in additional annual pay. It's like, it's a very valuable benefit for folks to have. And it also disproportionately benefits people who need lots of flexibility in their schedule to do caregiving or pursue a side project, right? And so what we're really finding is like this doesn't cost businesses any money, but it really is a valuable benefit to workers, and it really helps with talent attraction. And it's not just where, it's the when, right? What days do I work? What hours do I work? And then honestly, 401k, it's like the sleeper benefit in terms
Yeah.
of return on investment. Honestly, not as many businesses as you would think offer it.
Mhm.
And it's relatively cheap compared to health insurance, especially, right? But
Yeah.
lots of other benefits. And because it's like you can stack it right on top of your spouse's benefit or your partner's benefit or another family member's benefit, right? If I don't have health insurance, but my partner has health insurance, I can get health insurance through them or through an online marketplace. But that's not true of 401k and retirement benefits. So it has this huge ROI. It's over 100% when we calculated it. And these are benefits that employees really, really value, and it really help them sort of build life the way they want to, in a way that really integrates work for them.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm a big fan of it, of course, myself. I believe that, a lot of people have things going on throughout their life. I don't have any kids, but, I have a lot of friends, family that have kids, and I couldn't imagine finding the time for it just yet. But people need that flexibility, right? Maybe you do have to bring your kid to soccer practice and whatnot. But to me, as long as people are getting their work done and they're being effective, I mean, you have to be available during certain business hours of the day to, get meetings when everybody else is kind of collectively together doing the quote unquote 9 to 5. But, a lot of these people can be getting, project work done at, 8 o'clock at night, if that works, if that suits them. Maybe they're an early bird. They like to wake up early, and like myself, I like to wake up early and get a lot of projects done, because sometimes during the day we get a lot of meetings going back to back, and to get that hardcore work done, like spreadsheet work, you have to sometimes find time outside of those normal working hours to get it done. So, remote work and having that lifestyle really gives you that flexibility to be able to pull that off and actually be a more effective worker because of it.
Yeah, it really does. But I think the caveat there is that you can't sort of expect you have to organize that work really intentionally. So
Yep.
one of the things that we found that really differentiates, remote and hybrid companies that are very happy with the experience from remote and hybrid companies that think that their experience is just okay,
Yep.
is whether or not how good their documentation processes are,
Great
right?
point.
How much is documented, and how much do they intentionally build community by expressing gratitude, having small celebrations, like really taking time to build connection as opposed to just getting the work done, right? Which honestly isn't like a
Yeah.
what should you do differently. Everybody knows that if you want somebody to come work, you should tell them where the printer is and how to fill out the forms and
Yeah.
how to pursue their work, which honestly is really easy when you're in office
Yeah.
and you just ask
Hawaiian
somebody, but
shirt
it's
Fridays.
harder. Yeah, but it's harder, right? When you're a remote worker, you have to do it more intentionally,
Yeah.
but and then just sort of taking the time intentionally to build that community and that connection. It's just that people want to know how to do their job and do it well, and they want to feel appreciated. And that's true whether or not you're in person or hybrid or
Yeah.
remote. It's just that in a hybrid or remote environment, you have to build that differently and with greater intention, because it doesn't happen naturally, right? When you're in person.
Yeah, that's a great point. So process is everything, right? So to your point, great documentation. Onboarding is very key for employees. Get them introduced right away to new people, to people that have been with the company for a while. Set up individual meetings with them. Let them start to build rapport and a working relationship with these people. Because there's nothing worse than being thrown into the water and being told to swim when you don't know how yet. So
Yeah.
that onboarding process is key. And I've seen, to your point, that make or break the entire remote hybrid work
Yeah.
culture right there.
Yeah, actually, onboarding is one of what we call like a critical period, where it actually is pretty valuable to bring people on site and to have lots of face-to-face interactions so that they can learn the culture, ask all the questions, really build those relationships. It just sort of smooths everything. And that's not to say you can sort of let all the other stuff go if you do that, but onboarding is one of those really critical periods where even remote and hybrid companies that think, their experience is very good, really do say it's important to create that face-to-face time during onboarding.
Have you seen any particular tools that people like to use to ensure that there's a great communication among team members, organization, file management as well, so that they're all on the same page?
I think it matters less which tool you use and a lot more that everybody knows which tool to use and
How to
how
use
to
them?
use it. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we're actually developing a new program with NachoNacho. It's called Mavens. It's for
Mhm.
implementation specialists. So it's for a lot of these companies that hear about Notion or maybe some of the more
Mhm.
complex products and need help onboarding them. I use Gusto, so thankfully I know Gusto is really easy to onboard, but there might be some people out there that do need help with that. And that's why I know you guys have partnered with a lot of accounting firms, for instance, as
Mhm.
a way to kind of help onboard people and show them how to use the product. But
Yep.
to me, it's really intuitive. I've been using it for years. So
Yeah, I mean, not to sort of super plug Gusto since I don't want to be too promotional here, but I think they've really invested in the user interface to be very seamless and very smooth and just super human friendly. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and a lot of times it's all about removing friction and the proper onboarding. I found Gusto always had a pretty good onboarding for small business owners, actually.
Yeah. Sort of built with them in mind.
Yep. So I guess founders that are going down the path of remote and hybrid work, is there any other tips that you would offer these people to make sure that their team members are performing at a high level, especially like month 6 and beyond?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that one of the things that also really distinguishes folks that are doing remote and hybrid work very well is actually the level of check-in and communication and engagement that they have with their managers and with their teammates. So
Mhm.
you as a manager in an in-person setting might have a check-in most commonly once a week, maybe every other week with your direct report. And it's actually flipped for fully remote companies, right? The most effective cadence is minimally once a week, but more often, right, 2 or more times a week. And
Yep.
there's a trade-off there in terms of productivity, but what you really get out of that is that remote companies that do this, they get consistent like rebaselining and reorienting and like confirmation of the goals we're working for and how you're doing against those outcomes, which obviously if you're a manager at a remote company, you have to figure out how to make time to do that. Like it does change the management structure a little bit, but it really does help people feel connected and like they know what their job is. And then the other thing is just again really intentional community building, bringing people on site or scheduling specific social engagements for them to really sort of build and repeat that community is really important past the onboarding process. Some shows of appreciation, especially in a remote team, and just taking the opportunity to really express gratitude is almost as effective as an in-person meeting. And I think the highest performing companies sort of stack those two things, but we shouldn't forget the little things in favor of the big things because that's actually the glue that holds a lot of remote and hybrid companies together.
Yeah, it's really the small wins I think
Mm.
I've seen over the years that really motivate people to get to the next step towards like the big goal that everybody's trying to accomplish. But it's sometimes it can be a little disheartening for people, whether it's an employee or a business owner, if your goal is a really big one, which we should all have, but it takes a while and a lot of effort to get there, right? But if you could celebrate those small wins, not only for yourself but for your team, that motivates everybody, including yourself and your team, to kind of get from that one step to the next, right? It could be a
Mhm.
celebrating a new customer coming on board.
Mhm.
It could be, on your weekly stand up, it could be announcing what you're appreciative of another employee on the team, like something that they did, kind of give them a shout out, if you will. Little things like that. I totally agree goes a long way.
Yeah, and I think especially for startups, right, where the environment is so fluid, you're changing things all the time. There's in fact in an ideal world like a fair amount of failure as you're figuring out, right, how to really make it run and make it successful. And so really creating a strong culture is almost like for an athlete like core training, right? So that
Yeah,
you can be really agile and you can sort of take what comes at you. That comes through loud and clear when we have looked at this research.
great. I guess where could founders go to get more data and insights from you?
Yeah. So if you Google Gusto data and research, you can find us. You can also just go to gusto.com. There's a link in the drop down. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can subscribe to the Gustonomics podcast and hear everything that we talk about there. We also, if you are interested, you can go and look for our economic data tracker, which is at gusto.com/data and research. And you can actually look up hiring, termination, pay rates for your industry and for your area. So you can keep tabs on that. It's updated every single month. And then you can find all of our research there too.
Great. And I'll make sure to post that into the event page. Up, Candace has got it. She's on top of it. Yeah. So everybody, once again, thanks, Liz, for joining us today, and everybody else for joining the webinar. Really insightful topic here, and I'm glad to have you on today. If anybody's looking to dive into more and geek out on this economic data, feel free to reach out to her or check out some of the insights that they posted right there. This is the best source to get it. So, don't be afraid of what's going on in the macro conditions. Just, if you follow the data and you listen to the experts, you can make your own decisions for how you operate your business in this complex environment. Once again, Liz, really appreciate you coming on today. Definitely recommend everybody to check out Gusto if you haven't heard of them yet. I doubt this is your first time hearing about them, but check them out in the B2B SaaS marketplace. NachoNacho is the best place to buy SaaS, and you can find Gusto in there as a valued partner of ours. So thanks again.
Thanks so much, Andy.
You too.